key assumptions, and plans for future report cards. The first assumption is maturity considerations, which is related to the availability and quality of the data. Some asset classes have been collecting and reporting on their inventory and condition for several years, while some other areas are relatively new to the process. For the two asset groups included in this report, transportation assets are considered to have a high maturity, while facilities are considered to have a medium maturity. It's important to remember that asset management is relatively new, and as the city gains more experience and knowledge, the maturity of the information will improve and that the estimated costs may be adjusted. So in regards to the asset or the funding assumptions and the funding levels used in both the report cards and the decision support system are reflective of the rehabilitation or replacement costs, which is funded primarily from the Capital Infrastructure Reinvestment Reserve Fund, also known as CIRF. Funding from development charges or CRF, Capital Reserve Fund, are excluded as they are used to fund growth or studies. The next few slides will share some highlights from the transportation report card, which includes roads, sidewalks, trails, and trail links. The current value of that collective grouping of assets is $769 million, and it's anticipated that the average funding of $3.3 million will result in conditions for that transportation network declining to a level that's anticipated to be unacceptable to most stakeholders. As you may recall, the graph before you is one of the key outputs that we can generate from our decision support system. This particular chart is reflective of our transportation network assets and is based on the 2019 to 2028 capital budget. Based on this information, staff are able to identify that the city has approximately 5% of transportation assets that are in very poor condition, so the red bars on the graph. Based on projected funding from the capital budget and aggregation curves, we are able to project that almost 75% of transportation assets will be in very poor condition by 2043. The city evaluates the condition of roads using Pavement Quality Index, or PQI, on a scale of 0 to 100, with roads with a rating of 80 or above are considered to be in excellent condition, while roads with a PQI of 20 or below are considered to be in very poor condition. The target condition for each road segment varies based on road classification. Larger volume roads have a higher target condition. For example, arterial and collector are deemed replacement candidates when their PQI falls below 45, while local or rural roads, when their PQI falls below 40, is when they're considered a rehabilitation candidate. Their average annual funding gap for transportation is determined between a comparison of the budget scenario and the target scenario. The budget scenario is created using the asset condition as well as projected funding and aggregation curves, while the target scenario is based on the targeted levels of service. Using this approach, the transportation assets have an estimated $15.1 million annual infrastructure funding gap, with $14 million of that for roads and the rest split between sidewalks and trails. Similar to the last few slides, the next few will focus on the highlights from the facilities report card. One area to highlight in this report card is that it's to focus on the tax-based supported assets such as City Hall, the Button Factory, and the main library. Facilities funded by enterprise operations such as the Parkade, Parkview Cemetery, or sanitary pumping stations are excluded and funded through their own enterprise areas. As a result, the current value of tax-based supported funding facilities is $268 million and is supported by an average annual funding level of $2.8 million. Similar to transportation assets, it is anticipated that facility asset condition will decline over the next 25 years. Similar to the transportation graph, you can see before you that almost 20% of facility assets are deemed to be in poor condition, very poor condition. And by 2043, almost 40% will be in very poor condition. Similar to transportation, the average annual funding gap is determined between that comparison between the budget scenario and the target scenario. Using this approach, facility assets have an estimated $1.5 million average annual infrastructure funding gap. So upcoming reports. If this report before you today is approved, staff will prepare report cards for more asset classes over the next few years, using the same methodology and format as the transportation facilities report cards. The next set of report cards is proposed to be tabled at the June FSP meeting and reflect city utility assets. These assets includes water distribution, sanitary collection, and stormwater. Report cards for other asset classes such as fire services, parking, parks, bridges, information technology will be developed and tabled before council over time until we reach December 2022. That concludes today's presentation. Thank you again. Together with subject matter experts from engineering, transportation, and facilities, we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Cass, for those report cards. It looks like our forecasted grades are getting less good by the year. As a reminder, Council, and as Cass mentioned at the end, the asset managers are here to be able to answer questions not just about the reports and the data that went in, but to help Council understand how it is that the city does do the maintenance that is built into these report cards behind the scenes as well, since I know we are not experts. That's why we pay experts, but sometimes it's useful to know. We recorded some Saturday morning cartoon notes about that. Questions from Council? Councillor Bartley.
Within the transportation division, so one of the things that was noted was that, through you, Chair Henry, one of the things that was noted was that the annual gap has increased to $15.1 million since the 2016 asset management plan. And it says due to inventory and cost estimate updates. And I'm wondering if maybe you can just elaborate on that to explain a little bit more detail what that means and how we make sure that that isn't going to continue to increase when we're looking at this 3 years from now.
Through you, Chair Henry, to Councillor Bodley.